public notice. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of Berners Township. Notice of the time and place of this meeting were provided, and copies of the resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the Township Clerk, and a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices. For those members of the public who cannot attend our meeting in person, a live stream link to the meeting is posted on the district website, www.bernersbo.com. We very much welcome input from the public. There are 2 times during regular meetings that the public is invited to speak. One time is early in the meeting before the board votes, when you may speak about any item that's listed on tonight's agenda. Towards the end of the meeting, there's another public forum to address any matter of public concern related to the schools. When you approach the microphone, please state your name and address. Each statement by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes duration. No participant may speak more than once during a given public comment session. The first public comment session will be limited to 30 minutes and the second will be unlimited. In order to run efficient meetings and to allow maximum opportunity for members of the public to speak, the board reserves the right to set a different time limit for individual comments and the overall time limit for the public comment portions of the agenda. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No participant may address or question board members individually. Please understand that public comment portions of our agendas are not structured as question and answer sessions, but are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. The board administration will respond to public comments to the extent possible. Any board responses to public comments will generally be addressed during board forum or committee reports. However, all comments are considered and will be investigated and addressed as appropriate. Please be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when speaking. Comments may not be abusive, obscene, threatening, or irrelevant. Please understand that students and employees have specific legal and privacy protections. The board is not permitted to respond in public to comments about students and employees. Please also understand that the board will not be responsible for the content of comments made by members of the public. Members of the public are cautioned that they are speaking at their own risk, and any personally directed statements they make may subject them to legal liability to the affected individual. If it's necessary for the board to go into exec session at the end of the meeting, we will provide an estimated length of time for the session, and with any action is anticipated to be taken upon return to public session. And with that, can we have a roll call?
Ms. White?
Yes.
Dr. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Chipok? Ms. Corrado?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
And Mr. Omalanik?
Yes.
We're now up to the student representative, which is always a big highlight of our evening. Joseph, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Ms. White. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. We are now a full week into our off and away phone-free pilot, but before I jump into that, I'd like to give just some positive extracurricular updates. To start us off, our boys basketball team wrapped up an impressive 22-7 season with 2 thrilling home playoff wins against Union and Irvington. They did end up falling in the North 2 Group 4 state semifinals to Elizabeth, who's ranked 14th in the state. But the end of the season was packed with a lot of energy, and I could say from personal experience, they provided some amazing moments for our student body, and that's the loudest I'd heard our main gym in my 4 years at Ridge. So it was pretty neat. Keeping up with the success is our unified basketball. For the first time in program history, the team is heading to the NJ State Championship game this upcoming Saturday at 10:30 in the morning at Rutgers University. Additionally, the boys hockey team finished the season with a positive 14-10-2 record, winning their first round sectional tournament game against Wall 8-3 before falling in the second round of states. Moving on to fencing, the boys team defied expectations to win the entire state team title, taking down top-ranked Don Bosco, Montgomery, and Milburn. They ended the season with a nearly perfect 16-1 record. And the girls team also had a stellar 14-2 season, missing the championship bid by just 1 point in the final game. On the track, the boys 4x8 relay team won the state championship last Sunday, running the 3rd ever fastest time in Meet of Champions history. They, along with 4 other Ridge relay teams, are now headed to New Balance Indoor Nationals in Boston this upcoming weekend. And the girls 4x8 team also medaled, placing 5th in the state Meet of Champions. Our swimming teams also competed in the state Meet of Champions over that same weekend. Outside of sports, our forensic team continues the trend of winning. They won first place at the Newark Tech Invitational and they're now competing in the NJSDL state tournament this upcoming weekend, aiming for their 23rd consecutive championship for the event. As for some in-school updates, we are currently in our first ever Unified Spirit Week, where our school is working to celebrate more inclusion and community with themed days all throughout the week. So today we began with Neon Day, and we're going to end on Friday by wearing orange and being a part of making everyone feel welcome. Along with the new Spirit Week, we also began the Hello Project today, an initiative that's been done successfully at other schools that encourages students to put their phones away, look up, and just connect face-to-face with each other. Dr. Lazovic held meetings with the Project Adventure Peer Leaders team today to discuss the importance of small interactions like just saying hello or inviting someone into a conversation, and how they can build confidence and remind students that they do indeed belong here. Teachers around the school have been given laminated cards of well-thought-out conversation starters, and the students have also been given their own separate set of conversation questions labeled 1 through 10 that they can ask their teachers and their friends. The cards are also pasted on our cafeteria tables for ease of access, and hopefully this can spur some new conversations around the school, and I'm personally excited to see how far this goes and just to try to branch out more myself. And as I mentioned in our last meeting, our May and June senior internships continue to have their applications open until April 21st for students to participate in month-long real-world experience at places like dental offices, libraries, and athletic studios. Looking ahead to the end of this week, Amnesty Club's Pi Teacher fundraiser is this Friday on Pi Day, and also our freshmen and sophomores have their spring dance on the same day. So that's all for now, and thank you everyone, and I look forward to next time.
Thank you, Joseph. As always, you are welcome to stay. If you work, we totally understand. And the rest of us, we are going to be going down for the presentation for the budget.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Nick Markarian. I'm the superintendent. With me is Jim Rollo, our business administrator, and we're here this evening to review the preliminary school budget that needs to be submitted to the state for review and approval. So goals for our budget, obviously, we have a lot of great programs, services for the students, and many wonderful staff to deliver those programs and services. So thanks to all of the staff members that joined us this evening. We certainly hope to accomplish our mission, our philosophy, our goals, and sustain the things that we've been doing in the district for quite some time. And this will be a challenge this year. However, we are going to be taking advantage of all of our possible resources to make for another excellent school year in 2025-26. In terms of our budgeting, you may be aware that we lost some state aid this year This is a common thing that happened to many districts. We lost 3% of our state aid, and many districts have been advised to expect a little less money from federal resources as well. So those will be factors as we work through our budget presentation this evening. The process, just to give you a little bit of an idea, budget is a tool. Those of you that use a budget at home, I'm sure you know that. It's not perfect. You use it to guide your expenditure from time period to time period. In our case, we go from July 1st to June 30th as our fiscal year. But even over the summer, we start making preparations for the next budget because in the case of project work in particular, that type of thing can take quite some time to plan and implement. So on any given summer, or even really before, we're talking about what's going on in the next summer for any major projects that we have to undertake that involve a lot of planning and procurement. Usually around December, we start getting all of our school budgets and supply accounts, curriculum accounts, things of that nature. They're generally submitted to the business office around December, so that by the time we get to January, we can start to see where we are with an expectation on flat funding, typically, and looking at those budgets that folks proposed. This January, when we compared the proposed expenditures to where we were on the revenue side, we had about a $6 million gap. Now, that's a big number. However, that is the first pass of the budget. So going forward, obviously we have to make adjustments. We can't sustain a $6 million budget deficit, so we have to make adjustments. That process usually involves looking at all the accounts and thinking about, well, what was spent in this account in the prior year when we look at the audit, and how's that account going in the current year? Looking at that trend, we try to make adjustments on what was requested for those accounts going forward into the next budget, obviously taking into consideration any new needs that may come along and deciding whether or not we can afford them. So going through that process this winter, on the first pass through, we got down to about a $5 million gap. And like I said, it's ongoing, so you're constantly working on it throughout the winter. Come February, as you may be well aware, the governor announces what's going on with state aid. And as I mentioned, in our case, we did have a reduction in state aid. We anticipate that will translate to approximately $364,000 in lost state aid. If you factor that in with a 2% increase on the tax levy and all of the accounts that we were able to trim, we went to a $4.4 million deficit in our budget between revenue and expense. Now, again, not a particularly exciting situation to be in, but not unique. Last year, we were in a very similar situation when I came to you in March, and I explained the same thing. We've got about a $4 million budget gap. Last year, we took the approach of saying, can we kind of split this and try to come up with enough savings and enough additional revenue to close this gap? In the March of 2024, we did that by adjusting the school start times, you might be familiar with that, and changing our busing, and that saved us probably a little over $1 million. We also had staff reductions. That was about another $1 million. So we reduced expenses by about $2 million. The board approved the use of some banked cap, which Jim will explain a little bit later, and so we raised the levy above 2% to 3.92% for the current year budget. And that's how we created the additional revenue we needed, paired that with the staff reductions and the transportation savings, and we closed the $4 million gap. So what are we doing this year? We don't have the transportation rabbit in the hat anymore. We used that last year. We don't have the ability to save another $1 million on transportation. So there's less opportunities for savings this year. What we're proposing to close that gap is an expense reduction this year that was greater than last year's expense reduction. So we're looking at reducing about $2.51 million in expense and going to the board and asking them to go above the 2% cap with an additional 1.97% increase on the levy, so that the levy increase would go to 3.97% higher. So up in revenue, an additional $1.87 million over 2% cap, down in expense another $2.51 million. So that you know, we have already cut a lot to get from $6 million down to $4.4 million. And you'll notice that I was talking about non-salary accounts. So we've scrubbed the budget, health benefits, transportation, utilities, supply accounts, professional development, staff college, summer curriculum writing, textbooks, to get down to that $4.4 million. What we haven't done is close the rest of the gap with the other 60% of our budget, which is staff salaries, okay? We're not going to be able to get to $2.51 million by going back to that little part of our budget that's only 25% of our overall budget that is discretionary or somewhat discretionary. You still have to have heat, you still have to have gas, electricity. We've cut that as much as we can. So unfortunately, we're going to be in a position where we're looking at staffing with $2.51 million. Okay, Mr. Rello.
All right, so every budget tells a story. Every budget is different. Last year, the story of last year's budget is some of the biggest drivers was transportation, which we saw our costs going up and up and up. We had out-of-district placements driving that budget, and this year's different. Transportation has actually gone down overall as a result of the board successfully triple tiering, reducing the number of routes. We aged out some out-of-district placements, so it's a different budget, different story. This year, the story is salaries and benefits, which is most of the budget, but really more than anything, it's benefits. So at the risk of being a little bit simplistic, if you look at the current budget as three big buckets, this is the breakdown of the current budget. Salaries, 59.7%, benefits, 16.1%, and as Mr. Mercarian said, everything else, everything from Chromebook to electricity to a copier, fits in the other orange wedge. And that is fairly standard across all New Jersey school districts. It's about 75% of salaries and benefits. So where we knew we were going to have some serious challenges is if we took the salary portion and decided to index that by the county average. And we, in prior years, we had the ESSER funds, which we were able to charge off the extended school year program to. And we just bring that back to the general fund operating budget where it had been prior to COVID. So with just the county average, salary adjustments, and ESY coming back, with the current group of bodies that we had, we would expect that to go up $3 million. We looked at the health benefits cost center, the other big piece of the pie wedge. After consultations with our insurance broker and looking at contributions via Chapter 44, that's going to result in a budgetary increase of that cost center by almost $4 million. So right there, and we turn into the non-salary and benefits portion of the budget. Well, if we look at CPI and inflation, we know the cost of everything is going up. And if we would have just taken what we spent in this current year, or what we budgeted to spend, and moved that forward by CPI, 3.57, that would have brought another almost $1 million increase. All in all, that would have resulted in a 7% operating increase, which would have required a tax levy increase of 9.22% to fund. So obviously, this was not something, we could do. This would not be tolerable. But these are big picture. This was the challenge we were up against. So, what did we do? Well, we'll jump to the third row in the table. As Mr. Markarian said, we went line by line and reduced and eliminated and scrubbed discretionary spending where we could. So instead of the non-salary and benefit lines going up, adjusted for inflation by almost $1 million, actually we cut them back 1.3. You could look at that as a swing of, almost 2.1 million in reductions. So we've kind of cut to the bone there. Health benefits is something that we don't really have the flexibility. We have looked under every rock and have pitched just about every conceptual way to try and reduce this cost center with our broker. But it looks like this is the number that we have to go with. We're tracking our claims month to month, and this budget driver is not something we're going to be able to work around. So what that means is that we had to look at the salary section to get the rest of the way to a manageable budget. We came up with a number that we think we may be able to achieve, a 2.51 million reduction in staffing, and that would reduce the increase in overall salaries by to only 568,000. So changing the mix to these numbers in these buckets, that would require a tax levy of 3.97%, and a resulting operating budget increase of a 2.83% increase. What does it look like? Another pie chart with a few more categories. You'll notice the real difference between this pie chart and the current year pie chart is salaries shrunk a little bit and benefits ate a little bit. So benefits grew at the expense of some of the other categories. Okay, so the $4 million elephant in the room that needs an explanation is the 3.9 million increase in health benefits. Why? Where did it come from? Well, in many respects, that number is driven by events put into motion quite a few years ago. So for a full understanding, you have to understand that there's two statutes that govern employee contributions to health benefits for boards of education. The old one, which was Chapter 78, passed in 2011, and the current one, which is Chapter 44. The big difference is that in Chapter 78, the required contributions towards health expenditures was tied to the cost of the health expenditures. So as the health expenditure cost went up, the board and the employees shared that increase in cost. All right, in March of 20, I think it was signed into law, maybe in the summer of 20, and effective for July of 2021, Chapter 44 replaced Chapter 78. The most important feature of Chapter 44, as far as boards of education are concerned, is that the contribution towards health benefits is now tied to the employee's salary, no longer the increase of cost in health care. And that had serious implications in terms of school budgets. However, it weren't really realized at that time, because as soon as the law went into place, we were in the middle of the pandemic. And so people weren't going to the doctors. So claims across most districts were pretty flat, maybe even dipped a little bit. Elective procedures, diagnostic testings, and things like that, people just weren't getting done for a couple of years. So the law got passed, rates and contribution schedules changed, and then we didn't see the impact of what would happen. Now we're out of the pandemic, now we're starting to see the impact. And the impact looks a little something like this. I don't know how visible it is for folks in the audience, but when we talk about this slide that we've always had in the budget is a history of 2% levy increases. Well, that only tells part of the story. Boards were able to do a 2% levy increase because there was a significant contribution from the employees to help offset the cost of health benefits. So going back to 14-15, which was the year that most districts had the fully phased in Chapter 78 contribution, the employees were contributing $1.5 million. And so you add that revenue coming in, and then you can get by building your budget with only 2%. At that time, the board share of the health benefits cost was 86%, but as you can see, the contributions from employees, not so gradually, actually pretty significantly early on, jumped from 1.5 million to 2.2 million to 3 million. These are $800,000 increases, give or take, year over year, so that the board's share of health benefits costs went down throughout all these years, making 2% levies a lot more realistic. We start to come to a peak right here in 1920. This is the last year of Chapter 78. You've got almost a $4 million contribution towards offsetting the cost of health care. The board share is down to its lowest point in the past 20 years, where they're only paying for just under 75% of the cost of health benefits. And then Chapter 44 comes into play. And so what happens, while we had increases in employee contribution, we start to see some decreases. You'll notice in this column over here, where the health benefits costs are, there's not that much cost caused by the increase in claims. And actually, there's a dip in claims from 2021 and 2022, and 21-22 to 22-23. And this kind of tracks with what we know anecdotally, in that you just couldn't get in to see a lot of doctors, and you were really deferring things that you could afford to during the pandemic times. But now that we're out of that, people are going back and getting treated and getting healthy again, thankfully. But we're seeing the claims go back up. You saw from 22 to 23 to 23-24, almost over a $3 million increase in costs to the board for health benefits. And then again, from 24-25, our current year, to next year, we're projecting, again, another increase, significant increase, to go up to 18.2 million. Now, while this section from yellow to green, you're going up almost 50%, this cost center, over the course of 3 budget cycles. It's almost a $6 million increase. Yet you'll notice here in white, the contributions are no longer increasing. Now we're starting to see what Chapter 44, how this thing changed, right? So the board's costs go up and the employee contribution goes up a little bit, but it's a lot smaller amount. It's a lot more gradual. So that story told without the numbers, but with more of the graph. What we have to budget is the space between the red line and the blue line. That's what goes into the budget. So in 22-23, that number was about 12 million and change. What we're looking at for 25-26 is about 18.2 million. So we've gone from having to budget 12 million for 22-23 to 18.2 million. And we expect the blue line to trend upward. There are some cost drivers that we are keeping our eye on that we're concerned about, GLP-1s among other them, but we expect the blue line to continue to go up. Unfortunately, we expect the red line to more or less have the same slope. We only expect incremental increases. And that is really the story of this budget, is we're forced to absorb this, and there's not much wiggle room around it. So to look at what drove those changing amounts and contributions, this is the breakdown of our employees in terms of what plan they were contributing under. And a requirement of this Chapter 44 is that after 2021, when an employee was hired by the district, they had to go into Chapter 44, so there wasn't an option. So basically, over time, everyone knew that you add to the organization is on Chapter 44. So as you can see, you would expect more and more people to join Chapter 44 plans, fewer and fewer to remain in Chapter 78 plans, where we are at 24-25. You have the lower contributions, because remember, in the Chapter 44 plan, regardless of what happens to the cost of health insurance, their contribution is only going to increase very, very modestly. And in 21, 22, you had a larger share of employees who, as healthcare costs increased, their contribution also increased. So you had a little bit of an offset. So, and the other thing with Chapter 44 that's frustrating to manage from a budget perspective is Chapter 44 essentially removed the ability of the boards across the state to work with bargaining units and change the structure of health benefits plans. Under Chapter 78, whenever costs rose quickly and everyone felt the pain, management and labor could kind of come together and look at different options and come up with a solution and change plan designs and things like that. Chapter 44 tabled that ability for all boards until 2027. So you just have to stick to the plan designs that Chapter 44 created, the EHP and the GSP, and we have to wait for that to end and then see what our options are. It made it a lot more difficult to try and address runaway increases in healthcare costs than boards had under the Chapter 78 law. This is just our annual enrollment slide. It looks to be, we're a little bit higher than our demographer's projection from last year. I think when he came to, was it finance or facilities and operations, and gave us an update on his projections, noted that he had more move-ins than he had anticipated. But all in all, we seem to be tracking pretty close to his predictions. Okay, so we talked about the cost drivers, and we talked about the revenue side a little bit. There are a couple of ways that a Board of Education can raise a tax levy above the 2%. Bank cap is the one that we've taken here in Bernard's most frequently. Another one is a healthcare cost adjustment, which we are proposing to take this year as well. It kind of functions like bank cap. Districts can raise the levy over the cap when it's necessary for healthcare costs that are up 2% over the increase in the state health benefits plan, which, as we just talked about in 4 slides, that's really what's straining this budget. So it allows us, if there is a silver lining, it's not much of one, but it allows you to take a healthcare adjustment because the biggest cost driver is the cost of health benefits. So once we've used the healthcare cost adjustment of $1.7 million, roughly, we can use a little bit of bank cap. This is unused taxing authority that the board has from not going to the full 2% in 2 of the last 3 years. So there is the ability to use $153,000 in banked cap for this year. There is still some bank cap remaining after that. There is $1 million of bank cap that would be available for the board to use when we have to build the 26-27 budget. But those are the 2 buckets that we would recommend going above the 2% to balance this budget. Okay, this slide is just an overall of where we're at operating-wise. Operating our recurring expenses, that is going up an increase of $3.2 million year over year. Fund 12, which is where we do a lot of our equipment expenditures. We have some increased equipment acquisitions this year. Fund 12, the non-equipment portion is going down a little bit. We're just tackling fewer capital projects or less expensive ones. Those kind of vary significantly year to year, depending on which projects you take on. The capital reserve increase in interfund, this is really, the board here in Bernards has always kept the debt service schedule even by funding the increase above $5,115,000. The dollar amount above that, the board has always held flat at that 5.1 million number with transfers from capital reserve. So The debt schedule varies significantly year to year. Some years, as in last year, you only needed to bring $64,799 over to keep that debt service payment smooth. This year, for whatever reason, when the bonds were sold, they had a larger amount of payments due, and so there's a transfer of $479,312 to keep that debt service levy payment flat. That is a bit of tax relief. That is using some capital reserve to keep the tax levy down. Otherwise, that would increase the taxes overall as well. We've got reduced federal grant expenses. Recommendation we've received from the Department of Education is to budget less than your current year's allocation of federal grants, which we won't know the actual number until the May-June timeframe. Debt expenses, as you can see, this is why we need the 479 up above, is because year over year, the 24-25, we had 5.9 million of debt service payments, and next year we have 6.3 million. So the overall total budget is 128 million. If you were to look at the budget, look at all the different lines, and look for things that would jump out that are a little bit of unusual, that bear some explanation, these are probably the four biggest ones that jump out. Benefits, we've talked quite a bit about. There's the 3.9 million that's really kind of stressed and strained all other parts of the budget. The other, budget challenge that we've had is electricity. The PJM, the wholesale electricity auction, went out to bid. I don't fully understand all the details, but their wholesale costs went up over 100 times, and we've been advised that school districts' electricity expenses are going to go up by about 25% starting June 1. Also, all of your home electricity expenses will also be going up, so everyone is going to share in this suffering. So we are hoping that our improvements to the building HVAC system, in which we can turn classrooms off in the summer and not cool them, will allow us to not absorb the full brunt of the 25% increase. So that's why we only have a 16.72% increase on electricity. But either way, $147,000 is a big number on electricity. 15% increase in custodial services. This was somewhat anticipated. We had been advised last year that in our Aramark custodial service agreement, they had recently settled with their custodial workers union, and that they had a phase-in of increased health benefits contributions that wouldn't take effect for this current year, 24-25, but was going to take effect for the following year. They said it was a 16% increase, and the likely result was that would be passed on to us. So we kind of got that heads up last year. So we did go out to bid. We had a very good bid for custodial services. We had 5 bidders submit bids. There was a very tight grouping, which is very reassuring. It lets you know that you had a pretty tight bid spec and that there was good competition for the business. Aramark won. I think we awarded at the last meeting, but lo and behold, it was 16% higher than the year over year, and it does increase a little bit each year as well, as it if we choose to renew. So that one would jump out. Salaries, although after the required staffing reductions that Mr. Markarian talked about, the percentage increase is quite small, 0.84%. The dollar increase is still a big number that would jump out. This is almost more of a slide from last year. This year's story isn't really about out-of-district tuition, but it's kind of good and encouraging to see that we do a really nice job with for a district our size, that we don't have to send as many students out, that we have really, really good programs for our special needs students in district, so we can keep a lot of them in. Every time I look at this slide, certain numbers jump out at me, like Ridgewood, about the same size operating, but double the amount of out-of-district placements and 3 times the cost. So stinks to have our health benefits numbers, but, it's nice to have our out-of-district budget numbers. So take the good with the bad. The other year-over-year changes on the categories aren't really remarkable. The student transportation we're down $851,000 year over year. This is largely due to triple tiering. As we said, we reduced the number of bus routes that we needed. We also had significant savings in out-of-district transportation. We graduated a few kids, and we got a lot better per diem rates on all of the kids who were still in the program. Facilities and grounds are increases. A lot of those are due to maintenance projects, they're not quite capital projects in an accounting sense, but they feel like a capital project. One is a $400,000 district flooring. It goes into your maintenance budget, but it's really a one-time. Hopefully we'll get 30 plus years out of the flooring. And then others, not really significant when you look at dollar amounts in a positive or a negative direction. The budget is really being driven, salaries, benefits, a little bit on the electricity and the increase in the custodial, but that's, those are just the underlying factors, not the headline. With all that being said, we do have capital reserve money and some maintenance reserve money that we're using to, keep the facilities up to date. We have awarded the Mount Prospect roof replacement for this summer. I think we had a budget of $2 million for that. The bids came in significantly underneath. So even with the design and construction administration, that budget, we have $1.5 million for that, of which we will get 40% back. From the ROD, Regular Operating District grant that we were awarded for that. Cedar Hill and Oak Street, we have two direct install projects. This will be a blend of lighting, HVAC, and boilers at both Cedar Hill and Oak Street. The state and the utilities are revamping this program kind of as we speak. We're supposed to have the details of the new program. We're now hearing April 1. We've allocated the money there. These two projects are really, really good deals. These dollar amounts on this screen is the out-of-pocket expense to the board, so to speak. The total cost is in the millions for both of these. One of them represents 50% of the cost, and the other is 60%, that the utilities will pick up the other portion of the cost. Unlike the ROD grant, these projects, the board only has to lay out the board share. The ROD grant, the board must pay the full 1.5 and get reimbursed. With the direct install, the utility company actually pays the balance of the project to the contractor who completes the work. So they're very attractive programs to complete if you can do. In order to qualify for them, your building has to be below a certain overall kilowatt hour consumption, which Oak Street and Cedar Hill do qualify for, and you have to have enough equipment in those buildings that you can generate enough savings by upgrading to a more modern piece of equipment that makes the project worthwhile for the utility company. So we're fortunate that we should be able to get Oak Street and Cedar Hill to qualify, get new boilers and HVAC there. District-wide flooring, we mentioned briefly, floors in multiple classrooms and larger spaces across the district. We want to take another chunk of that and get those done. Our phone system, which is over 25 years maybe old, and is definitely long in the tooth and due for a replacement. We have in the budget a 54-passenger school bus. We will try and get that for cheaper if we can, but we've had great success this year by leasing a bus from a provider and having one of our own staff members make trips on that bus for athletics. And we're, in the prior years where we'd pay anywhere from $450 to $550 a day just to drive kids, in town from school to a practice site, we can do that a lot cheaper if it's our driver and we have a bus. So we had talked about that in facilities and operations and put that in there. And a couple other much smaller projects, the Mount Prospect playground wall, which is in sore need of repair, and some casework at the Liberty Corner or art room. Debt service, as I mentioned on the other slide, we are doing a transfer from capital reserve to smooth out the debt service payment to keep it at that $5.1 million. That's tantamount to a $45 in tax savings on the average home. And we have about $1.9 million in debt service payments remaining through the year 2031, assuming debt service aid remains flat. That should be the number. This is the revenue side of the budget. We talked about the expense side, the mix of how we're going to pay for it. We talked about the 3.97%. That's the top line number. That's the levy increase. We have modest increases elsewhere. About halfway down on the middle, we have a state aid decrease of 3%. This looks like the biggest percentage decrease, but it's really a nothing burger. This is a semi-Medicaid reimbursement program. The state tells us what number to put in here. We don't have the discretion to do that. And they just lowered that number from 20,000 to 1,500, but really affects next to nothing. Budget a little bit less on the federal side per Department of Ed's recommendation. And we're using a little bit more in reserves and fund balance to tackle more projects than we did last year. Maintenance reserve, a capital reserve, and emergency reserve, a little bit for the health benefits. So that brings the operating budget, including the Fund 11 operating stuff and equipment and some of the capital projects, to $120 million. We've got 1.4 in special revenue, 6.3 in debt service, a total revenue of 128. Just an overview of our reserve accounts that we have. Capital reserve, we have 11 million or so currently, but we have 31 million or so worth of projects slated to work on in the next 5 years. We have 7.6 million due to us in ROD grants, so that as we take on a portion of those, we'll get that money back from the state. The long-term debt is not really a capital reserve project, but you're allowed to, for tax relief, use some of your capital reserve money to keep that debt level flatter. We have a maintenance reserve, which we'll be drawing on in this budget to help fund some of the projects, flooring, some curb work and parking lot patching, playground maintenance, some HVAC controls. And we have an emergency reserve that you have as a prerequisite for being self-insured as we are. The tax impact, these numbers are preliminary. They don't have the final assessed values, but it's going to be close to what we expect. If you wanted to, again, look through rose-tinted glasses, you would say, oh, it's a decrease in the school tax rate, but it doesn't mean your taxes are going down. It means your assessed values went up. So the assessed values went up about 11%. So when the values go up, the rate that you need for the school tax goes down. But we're preliminarily projecting a tax increase in the average residential property of $405.92. All right.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Rollo. Just to highlight a couple things that Mr. Rollo went over. The issue of the tax levy is that there is a cap. It's a 2% cap. And what Mr. Rollo talked about were the allowable adjustments to that levy. Even if we took every single allowable adjustment available, including the bank cap that is still available, but in theory, for the 26-27 budget, you're still looking at cutting over $1.5 million from the budget. So There are limits. There's no option to sit there and say, well, just raise taxes. We have to cut about $2.5 million. We are certainly hopeful that we may yet find some other options, especially with respect to the health benefits. Great explanation of the impact of Chapter 44 versus Chapter 78. That's completely out of our control. It's out of the hands of anybody in this room. Nobody here. This is nobody's fault. We're taking care of our health, and that's great, but it comes at a cost, and the way the formula is set up legislatively right now, it is what it is. We have to manage that cost. We are hopeful that when we meet with our brokers one more time next month, maybe there's some solutions. Realistically, I'm not sure where that's going to come from, because your trend is your trend is your trend. You know, you have medical claims trending in a certain direction. If you don't budget for them, it's a recipe for disaster. So we need to do that. And we're going to have to transfer essentially some of our resources from the staffing wedge to the health benefit wedge of our distribution of expenses. So we will do that as painlessly as possible, which is quite the challenge. It's never painless to have to make those kinds of reductions. We'll be looking across the board to try to keep things even-handed, to have the least impact on our students and the programs. Everything from teachers to aides to support staff to administrators, we have to go through it all and come back in May on the 5th with where we stand and how we achieve that $2.5 million cut. We certainly will start with the low-hanging fruit. Folks sometimes leave the district, they take a job somewhere else, they get married and go to Hawaii and live happily ever after. They retire. Goodbye tension, hello pension. But that is not something that we can count on for a lot, right? A handful of folks move on to better pastures, and maybe you don't need to replace them. And so that helps, but it's not going to get you $2.5 million. So we're going to have to go through it all. Class size, we've been in a pretty good place, especially at the middle school and the high school right now, so we have the ability to absorb some of our need to reduce staff there. And I think that will be the area of focus, because we don't want to eliminate program, and that's one way you can do that. Your service is different, but programs are not being eliminated. I don't expect that we'll be coming back in May without any pinch. There will be, I'm sure, some where we're sharing some news about what we finally had to do to get here, but I don't think it will be substantial in terms of any kind of real program cuts. Some pinch, some contraction, if you will, is necessary as we work through the class size, but we've done enough preliminary work to know that we can get there. And if you read our class size report that we did earlier this school year, I think you can see that for yourself. Not easy, not desirable, but doable. So I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to get there. We have to submit our budget this month. The board's voting on it tonight, so we can get it to the state for review. And then we will be back here on May 5th for the final hearing, the public hearing on our budget. So with that, we can go up, and if there's any board questions, we'll follow up. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, I know that was a lot for everybody to take in. Some of us have heard bits and pieces in our committee meetings, but now would be the time for us to discuss what was just presented with us. And would anybody like to start the discussion? Dave?
Yeah, so I'll start, and obviously, all of that was painful, not just because it's a lot of numbers, but the numbers weren't good. So obviously, we're sharing the pain in this. There are gonna be cuts to staff, but there's also gonna be increases to taxes. So any way you cut it is just not great to present this, so I'm happy I didn't have to be the one to do it. But just looking at the increases, benefits going up over 21%, electric going up, small numbers, but 16%, custodial and grounds, 13%, losing state aid, all those combined, just recipe just for a tough year for us. So we're making tough decisions. Thank you for the administration. They're going through a lot of tough meetings to figure this out. But on top of that, I want to thank them for finding some cuts along the ways that don't hurt as much. They found some other utilities that are down. We've brought it in-house, some of the maintenance, definitely on the transportation side. There was a lot of push to get those costs down even more. So I know we're pushing them to do as much as possible, and we really did do that, and this is where we're at. Thanks.
Robin?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said, Dave. And I do want to thank you guys, because I know you've been working really hard with everybody to try to come up with creative ideas to find some savings. I did just want to ask, Jim, can you just articulate a little bit more about the ROD grants and our capital reserves? Because people always ask about that, because they see, oh, we have all these capital reserves. It doesn't look like we're short on money. Can you explain how it's already committed for the ROD grants?
Yeah, so the capital reserve account, you're allowed to have you're allowed to keep a capital reserve for capital projects up to the amount of projects on your long-range facility plan. So on the one hand, it's great that we have about $11 million in capital reserve, but there's $31 million of projects, and we do use the capital reserve for two purposes. One, to take on the projects that we need, like this summer, the Mount Prospect roof, but also, again, to keep taxes low, that we're making that $400,000 payment to keep the debt service low. So when you're self-insured and you have a good year, as you saw on the chart, there was some years where the health claims were flat or went down. Well, that generates surplus. And then the board, via their June resolution, will take the good year into capital reserve, and then you're able to do a roof like at Mount Prospect this summer without doing a bond issue and going to the public for a tax increase. You can take the savings that you realized on a good year by being self-insured and get those capital projects done. So that's the purpose of it. And then 11 million is good, but it's 400,000 for the debt service, 1.5 million for the roof, and if you're not generating more, it dwindles quickly. So it's a number that you definitely want to contribute to when you can, because we have just under 1 million square feet of buildings to maintain. And there's always projects and maintenance that needs to happen and renovation.
Keith?
Yeah, well, I've always said, I'm not opposed to raising taxes or spending money. I've said for 3 years, I always want to make sure that the money we spend is money well spent. And I know that's why a lot of people, they might disagree with me when I look at certain programs or certain expenditures, however small, because, say it again, as we've seen tonight, small numbers add up to big numbers. So that's why I've always taken a real close look at every single expenditure. Some things this year, from last year, we brought in-house with significant savings to the district. There was people who thought that was going to have negative consequences for certain students. It didn't. It actually wound up being better. So sometimes I think people are inherently resistant to change. I do feel that long-term budgetary management, it comes down to personnel and benefits, as you've seen on the pie charts. So in all those years when the district contracts, I feel through attrition, through breakage, it's proper to the greatest extent possible, contract with it. I realize it's not a one-to-one number. Special needs students, for instance, take more than, it's not a one-to-one equation. But when a district goes down in population by 20%, I think to to be responsible, you have to look at contracting along with it and not constantly expanding. That's the only way to bend the long-term cost curve. So, I mean, we are where we are right now. A little something for everybody to dislike. A pretty large tax increase and pretty significant cuts. So I do want to thank the administration, Nick and Jim, for trying to make those cuts as least impactful as possible on our students. And, you know, we'll see what the final budget brings in here in a couple weeks.
Janice?
I want to thank the administration as well. I think it's a very difficult challenge. I think that it's been done. The cuts are being looked at thoughtfully, and I particularly am grateful for the fact that all of the administrators, supervisors, and staff are going to be involved in the process. It's not the board recommending anything specific, but that the people who will be living it day to day are the ones who are going to be having input into the process. So I think that's important.
Brett?
I'm going to add on to say thank you. I know how hard it's been to go over the budget, and there's a lot of moving pieces, but really thank you for taking such a small sliver of the budget that you're able to work on. I know we're contractually obligated to so much of it between salaries and health benefits, and finding a way to cut in that small section of it first before having to move on to staff reductions and programs. So thank you for looking at that way. I know that's not easy to find as many cuts as you did in such a small sliver of the budget. And again, thank you for making sure it's not going to impact the students and programs the way it could. So thanks for the hard work.
Anyone else? Okay, then I'll speak. Our district is as wonderful as it is because of the people who are here, who work here and teach our kids every single day. And I think it's painful to all of us to think that we have to make any changes. But that's just the hard reality where we are. And so I really appreciate the time and the effort that is being placed into trying to do what will keep our schools as excellent as they are and keep our kids as well educated through the staff that they see every single day. I know that there will be changes between now and May as we get more information, and I can only hope that by the time we get to the final budget that it's not quite as dim as it is today for all of us. I think it leaves a very heavy heart for all of us because we believe so much in the district and the people who work here. I do just want to point out, we will, when we get to the finance section and we vote on items, we will be voting including this. That doesn't mean we're voting on the budget. We're voting to submit the budget for review. So I just want to clarify it so people aren't walking out tonight saying, oh my gosh, I thought this was the preliminary. It's just the process that we have to submit the budget, and we all have to vote to agree to submit the budget. Anybody else before we move on to the next? Okay, so we are up then to superintendent's report, and there are 2 items on it. Can I have a motion? Keith and Mike, is there anything that you want to talk about before we vote?
No, standard HIB report for every board meeting, and we have to authorize our needs assessment for the comprehensive equity plan. We have to do that every few years. It's been deferred actually for a couple years now, but the state is saying this is the year, so we're getting caught up on that, and we have to get the ball rolling.
Can we have a roll call?
Ms. White?
Yes.
Dr. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Corrado?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
And Mr. Omalanik?
Yes.
And with that, we are up to public comment. If you'd like to speak about anything on the agenda, please come down, sign in on the clipboard, and state your name and address before speaking.
Hello, my name is Frank Klaus. I'm at 18 Owens Court here in Basking Ridge. I'd like to commend the board on how things are being done. In preparation for today's meeting, I got to go online and look at the priorities for the next strategic plan. It really had a nice view on what the different stakeholders think is important for our school, and that is leading the way that we are going. I really like the fact that there are small group meetings being called to help make this, to bring in people from the community who really understand how to do things, to form focus groups and to work on it. I really like this presentation with the transparency that it provided. I would like the board to consider adding a strand, which what are these focus groups are being called, add a strand on the budget. Because there's a lot of people in this community who have spent many years having to make very hard decisions for their companies to make the same kind of cuts. They might have some ideas to help here. It would really align their interest, as many of them are parents and taxpayers, and it would really increase a further level of trust beyond just this presentation, because you'd let some of these people in to kind of look at the details and help make some things. So please consider adding a strand on the budget. And I'd like to ask if you can confirm a few things. So looking at the priorities for the strategic plan, the number one priority I read was the development of student competencies. I read that as teachers. Can you confirm that, and can you confirm that we are cutting teachers as the last possible measure, that we're looking at everything else because our top priority would be the student competencies? I also looked through the strategic plan and the priorities. Number 8 of 9, like almost the bottom, was DEI. I know in the past there's been some spending on that, and if we had the money, of course we would do that. I loved hearing the student representative talking about the Spirit Week and inclusion, but given that we don't have the money, can we confirm there's no external consulting on inclusion, and there's no staff being spent on this at this time, given the really hard position that we're in? And finally, so I'm so interested, the state is forcing us, but how much does it cost to develop a comprehensive equity plan, just so that we know? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klaus. Anyone else?
Debbie Marcus, 16 Lafayette Lane. Thank you for that very thorough and well explained presentation. One thing I didn't really hear in the discussion about the budget is the bigger picture of how much we need to spend per student and accounting for special needs and all the other factors that were mentioned. We have 1,000 fewer students than we did a decade ago, and our staffing level, especially at the higher admin level, remains at what it was back then. Now, I agree, we have more issues nowadays, and we probably do need more people than we had in the past. And in terms of the per student thing, I'm not talking about teachers at all. In fact, I would love to increase their salaries. And I appreciate the top level administrators, but we do have more vice superintendents than most other districts. And again, if it's proven to be necessary, that's fine. I just think there needs to be more questioning and reassessing what levels of administration we need, because even if we could take one administrator who's here, pay them more, and do some of the work of another administrator, we would save on not having 2 sets of benefits to pay. So it doesn't sound to me that we've looked at the bigger picture of restructuring some of our top level salary and benefit expenses, and I would, if we do another comb through the budget, suggest looking there. In the past, I will note, when there were more conservatively financial people on the board, we did have, even with the switch from Chapter 78 to Chapter 44 health care payments, the 0.73 and 0% increases in our tax levy. So it is possible. You make it sound like it's impossible to do this. It's not impossible. Just makes it a priority in terms of how we can keep our main programs and see where we can cut. The other item that jumped out at me that I wasn't aware of was the $6 million debt payment. Given that we already have the debt, obviously we have to pay and deal with it, but perhaps, I mean, that if we didn't have that 6 million, that would also fix this budget problem. So going forward, if we can try to minimize getting into more debt, that could help future budgets. The conservatively fiscally people in the past have all pleaded for years about at least working with staff attrition to not always backfill as an easy way to reduce some of our salary and benefit costs. And it's great to hear that you're doing it, you're considering it now. But of course, if we had taken a $100,000 position 10 years ago and done that, that would have been $1 million and benefits in saving already. So mainly, I guess when you look at it again, I'm requesting that you think about what is our per student cost that's necessary. That is the ideal of providing the best education we can for the amount of money we have. We can't just say we're going to spend as much as we can. We can always spend more. Pick at it, decide what would be the best balance, and stick to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marcus. Are there any other comments? Okay, we will close public comment.
Okay, so thanks for the public comments. As far as the strategic plan goes, thank you for noticing the efforts to try to bring some folks together in small group discussion. I know that invitation went out on Friday, so we'll leave that out for a couple more weeks and try to get those groups set so we can have those conversations. I'm sure there'll be some opportunities to talk about finance, especially within the group that Mr. Rollo is heading up with facilities and ops. We're going to have those discussion groups led by different folks. Ms. Fox is going to handle the academic programs, and Mr. Syatt, the staff wellness. I'm going to take the student wellness. So we've kind of divided up some duties here to run those conversation groups. So I think it'll be a great opportunity to get together and talk. And even though remote, for everyone's convenience, we've got a couple different opportunities to speak on each topic. So it'll be a great opportunity to weigh in. The questions about the comprehensive equity plan, there's no additional budget for the comprehensive equity plan. We're not looking to spend any money on getting that accomplished unless we want to add up hours and allocate an expense for that, but there's not an additional expense as far as any kind of consulting or anything like that is going to contribute to getting that plan done. It's the time of the people that are already here. I don't know of anything that you would consider a DEI expense in the 2025-26 budget, and I think we'd actually have to have a deeper conversation about what each of those letters is and what would fall into any of those particular buckets to understand whether or not there's expenditure. As far as how much we spend per pupil, there are calculations. The state generates report after report in school performance reports and other documents that identify how much school districts are spending per pupil. Those are widely varied when it comes to district because districts have different needs, different populations, different enrollments, and the staffing models to meet those needs can vary quite a bit. So you do see a wide range in what districts spend per pupil at various grade levels. So it's certainly a tool, but it's not an end-all, be-all. Debt payment, the district does have debt as part of its levy from prior years' issuance of debt for referendums and construction projects. That debt is set to end around 2030, if I'm not mistaken. So, when that happens, what happens to taxes? Well, we don't need to collect for debt anymore. But as Mr. Rollo mentioned, we have $31 million of projects and about $9 million available to fund it. And in the next 5 years, who else know, who knows what else needs to get added to the long-range facility plan. So, and I guess we'll see how that plays out. Thanks.
Okay, we're up to approval of minutes. May I have a motion? Dave, Keith? And roll call?
Ms. White?
Yes.
Dr. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Corrado?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
And Mr. Omalanik?
Yes.
Okay, what brings us to finance? There are 8 items on finance. May I have a motion? Brett and Janice. And Dave, do you have anything to add with your report?
Yeah, so I had 2 reports since the last one, but everything was budget-related or things we've discussed, so nothing else in there. As far as the items, again, they're all pretty much budget-related or talked about them already.
Anybody, any questions? Okay. Can we have a roll call?
Ms. White?
Yes.
Dr. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Corrado?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
And Mr. Omalanik?
Yes.
Okay, we're up to personnel. There are 13 items. May I have a motion? Janice and Mike? Is there a report?
The Personnel Committee met on February 21st. We had a discussion to review the contract proposal for the BTEA negotiations, and we talked about the budget and what has already been described tonight in terms of the shortfall. We've reviewed, different class sizes and demographics in the upper grades, and the administration described the process that they're analyzing, where there might be able to make some reductions or with people who are leaving or retiring. And that's all I can report out. Oh, and Mr. Syed advertised his career fair. You want to say about it now, too?
I don't know if it's a good timing to talk about it now, but there is a career fair May 1st. We were very successful, actually, last year. We had a number of vacancies we filled. It's the only in-person career fair in the state of New Jersey, not hosted by a college. It's a mouthful, but it's in person at Ridge High School May 1st, 4:30, 6:30, open to any New Jersey certified educator in the state.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Ms. White?
Yes.
Dr. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Corrado?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
And Mr. Omalanik?
Yes.
Okay, we're up to policy.
We'll be meeting this Thursday, so no report.
Okay. Curriculum.
We just met. Next time.
That brings us to wellness. I believe there is a report.
I do have a report. The Wellness Committee met on February 27th. We decided on meeting dates. The March 27th meeting will be held at Cedar Hill School, where we will meet with student government representatives. Liberty Corner, Oak Street, and Mount Prospect schools will be visited in the fall. On February 27th, we met with the William Allen student government. They shared their thoughts on a variety of topics. The majority of students were positive about the new start time, one benefit being more time for extracurricular activities. Students are enjoying the cafeteria and lunch options. They like the flexibility during Learning Lab to meet with peer groups for project work, with teachers for extra help or to make up a test, and the opportunity to sign up for various other activities that are offered by staff. 6th grade students shared that the May tours of WAMs provided by 8th graders and the platooning of 5th grade teachers in content areas helped to make the transition from elementary school a smooth one for them. There were a few suggestions for improvement. Teachers should consider the timing of tests and projects so students aren't overly burdened the week before a break. They would like the Viking Voices meetings to be more interactive and less content heavy. They would like to have 2 separate study hall spaces, one for quiet work and another where students can work together or converse. They suggested allocating outdoor space for different sports or activities and providing more recess equipment. Students also suggested using the proceeds from the Wham Slams event to return the turtles to the courtyard pond and to clean up the other courtyard for student use. And Mrs. Udock is looking into all of these suggestions. We had an update on counseling programming. The January 29th academic course fair for the first time featured student feedback about course workload and expectations. Both students and parents felt that this additional information helped in differentiating among college prep, enriched honors, and AP offerings in course selection. On January 29th, students also attended a career panel. It included parent representatives from a wide variety of professions. Tap Into Basking Ridge featured an article and a photo highlighting the event, and it was very well received by students. The career panel will again be included as part of next year's January Wellness Day. One board member suggested inviting a panel of Ridge alumni to speak about their experiences as young professionals just starting their careers. The counseling department is considering this. On February 26th, there was a district in-service. Winter Wonderland was an afternoon of professional learning for district staff developed by Ms. Fox, Dr. Lazovic, and Ms. Smith. It included a keynote panel presentation and 31 breakout sessions on a wide variety of topics based on staff requests. Many teachers commented that the panel presentation was the highlight of the day for them. Each participant shared a personal story about the lasting impact a teacher in the audience has had on their life. Some specific comments included, "The stories of wonder reminded me of why I chose teaching in the first place. It was well-timed, as the winter months can sometimes feel long and slow. They were all very touching and reignited my passion." Another comment was, "What a beautiful presentation. I left feeling appreciated, reinvigorated, and remembering my why." Beautiful, heartwarming, and uplifting. I was choking back tears the whole time. The last comment I'll share is, "You had hundreds of teachers, not a computer or cell phone in sight, paying rapt attention, tears in our eyes, thinking to ourselves, that is our why." So it was a very successful afternoon. As Joseph mentioned, the next chapter in the district's Restoring Focus initiative began this morning at Ridge. Studies show that even brief social interactions can help students develop stronger friendships, improve their mental well-being, and feel more connected to their community. Resources about the Hello Project will be shared on the Restoring Focus website. Dr. Lazovic is seeking input from peer leaders and student government representatives in implementing the Hello Project. The Ridge PTO has donated games and conversation starters and will provide prizes for students who meet the Hello Project Challenge. That's it.
Thank you. We're up to facilities and ops.
We'll have a readout next meeting.
Okay. That brings us to liaison. Do we have any liaison reports? Mike.
I was just going to say, I met with the Municipal Alliance last week, and it's a very successful program. And one of the things that they will have on June 1st, the 35th Annual Pleasant Valley Twilight Challenge 5K. And, it's going to be a fun activity. There's going to be a 5K, and there's going to be a 1-mile health walk, and the Children's Lollipop Loop is free. So come out. I think it will be fun. And they also did a survey that they are willing to present to the board, Pride Survey. It's the Parent Resource Institute for Drug Education, and they have some data from 2019 to 2024. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Are there any other liaison reports? Okay. That brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. If you have any comments, please come down.
Hello again. Debbie Marcus, 16 Lafayette Lane. Haven't moved since 5 minutes ago. Technically, this is an agenda item, but just wasn't time earlier. I just wanted to compliment the Wellness Committee had the Winter Wonderland. You mentioned the student sessions, but also I looked at the classes that were offered. And I was very impressed that using our own staff and teachers, we could have such a variety of items, of topics, such as building blocks of informational literacy, behavioral principles for special ed, best practices for supporting students with ADHD, creativity unleashed with AI tools, evidence-based comprehension strategies for special ed, how to respond to comments in the classroom. Let's talk about educational leadership by people up here, it's good. And so it's just to emphasize that using our own staff can be very effective, and in the past, we've often used outside consultants. I did note that we did still apparently hire the Joy Roots group that there's been, or I've commented on in the past, which focuses on restorative practices, which is not necessarily something that's evidence-based to be proved to be relevant to our district. So since we have all these other teachers and such who can run these kind of programs that have some proven evidence-based methods, I again encourage you to stop spending any money on Joy Roots, or at least insist on getting some kind of contract that if you don't see results, or what results you expect to get for the amount that we're paying them, regardless if it's a small or large number. Thank you.
Thank you.
Title Stein, Riverside Drive. I think there's spots in the budget that you could cut stuff. You need to have somebody stand by the buses that come to Ridge High School in the morning and count how many kids come off these buses. I'm not going to say every bus, but I'm going to say a high percentage of these buses are half full. The mini buses and the full buses. I see it every day. There's got to be a way you could combine the buses, these routes, or maybe pick them up and end high school, but there's ways of filling those buses up. There's no reason to have a bus go by with only 3 kids in the bus. That's a waste of money. That could be cut. The clubs and sports. I don't think we need to have, I can't even count I have to take my shoes off to count how many clubs and sports you have. But there needs to be a cap on the number of clubs and the number of sports. I'm sorry, they're going to have to cry a little bit also, but we need to have a cap. We can't, like the last club was the yachting club. I'm sure you must have about 50 kids in that club. I could, we need to look at that. Now I understand why we have, like you're saying 3.97 or we're close to that. I know it's because you didn't you didn't do 2% the one year, and it was only 0.73 the other year. And the town does that the same way. And the town is capable of doing that. And they also pay off the debt too. And I think we need to start paying down our debt. Being just, well, we're maintaining a debt is not good enough. Crazy stuff. The funniest thing is when you said a budget is just a guide. When I have a budget and I don't follow it, I don't go on vacation, I don't buy a new vehicle, the roof doesn't get fixed. If you don't follow that budget, you just ask more money from the taxpayers. And I think we need to look at that a little bit. I appreciate that the budget was done, it was transparent, and it's going to be what it is. I think there are spots you could look for cutting. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Coelho, 22 Benedict Crescent. So 3 points on the budget. I think very tough pill to swallow. Thank you, Mr. Rollo, for presenting. It was very well documented. I think it, again, reminds us of the need for a long-range plan with resources related to facilities planning, related to the contraction we've seen over the past years in the enrollment and increase in administration. So carefully look at the whole plan end to end, because where are you going to cut? Is it among the teachers or the administrators? I think that is an area you have to look at very carefully. The second point was brought up by one of the other persons who gave public comment. Again, we have consultants who are coming in and offering comment when we probably have a lot of experts within the staff or around town who could do the same service. So why are we spending time on consultants who are essentially taking off your watch and telling you the time? And I think the third area, I'd just like to applaud you. All spend a lot of time on this service, but think carefully about the impact you're having over the next 3 to 4 years. At a state government level, there is no money. If you look at the recent governor's presentation that is going forward in May, there's a $2.5 billion spend gap. So you're not going to get more money from the state now and going forward. So I think you have to plan for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coelho. Can you please just sign in at the clipboard? Thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay, I will close public comment. That brings us to board forum. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to discuss for board forum? Go ahead, Dave.
The only thing I wanted to bring up again was on the wellness, so I want to try to end it on something good. One of the best things that I heard about since I've been on this board, or even before that, is instead of doing a keynote speaker for the last PD day for the teachers, they brought up the students, and they brought them all up on stage to thank all the teachers. And to hear the stories in wellness about that was just amazing. It was moving to all of us in the room when we heard this. So I think that was so motivational to the teachers. I thought it was such a great idea, whoever came up with that. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming up with that. I'm sure from everything we heard, the teachers loved it as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
Yeah, we didn't comment after the wellness report, but I wanted to just say that I was really encouraged by what was reported out on the Winter Wonderland Day. I think it sounds like the staff really got a lot out of it. I think it does, as has been said, it does reinforce the talent that we have within our district, which does, to a large extent, really kind of negate the need to go outside of district at additional cost. Now, I mean, the fact of the matter is, the consultant here, consultant there, a bus here, a bus there, it's small potatoes. We saw the pie chart. But again, in good conscience, I need to call this out because if I'm going to vote for a tax increase on the community, I feel like once again, the money that we're spending should be maximally utilized, money well spent. And I always think, I'm glad Mr. Edelson came up, because I always think back to way back when we almost cut full-day kindergarten, if everybody remembers that. And, everybody was out there in the audience. I was out there in the audience. I had kindergarten at the time. I wanted full-day kindergarten. I'm glad we saved it. But, I always remember there were seniors that came up too. And they said, I can't stay in this town anymore. So, you saw on this chart, it's a $400 average tax increase. And, probably most of us in this room are thinking, all right, I can take that. It's not a big deal. It's very subjective. It's very subjective. You have a lot of senior citizens down in Social Security who $400 is a big deal, or $200 is a big deal. And it's a difference between making their mortgage payment or, skipping a couple meals during the week. So, I want to be mindful. I want to also be mindful that, yes, we're here for the children, we're here for our students, but we're here to provide them the best education that the community can afford. And what the community can afford, we have to take in mind the entire community. So that being said, I'm glad to see some residents of the community who maybe don't have children in school come up. They have every right to be here. They have every right to speak. And frankly, if they want to be up here on the board, they have every right to run for it too, because this is the entire town schools, and we all have a stake in it. So just want us to be mindful of that as we're raising taxes. What are we spending it on, even if it's right down to the little expenses? We have a fiduciary duty to make sure it's stuff that actually benefits the students.
Janice?
Yeah, I appreciate the wonderful job that the teachers did on our February in-service, and the suggestions as to limiting the number of consultants that are used. The Joy Roots consultant was already part of the contract that we had for this year, so that wasn't an additional expense. That was part of what he was contracted to do. And our teachers are able to do the kinds of professional development that they are after they have received similar professional development. So, next year there may be a whole different situation, and the picture may look very different. But that's why it was important for us to have teachers trained this year, so that they can, in fact, next year, if there's an opportunity to provide professional development to their peers, they have been trained to do so.
I couldn't agree more. I'm just saying we have a responsibility to make sure when a consultant does come forward that they present the proper data that we're satisfied that's worthwhile to proceed with the expense.
Mr. Stein, I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention, because it's come up multiple times, Ms. Corrado brought it up, the Winter Wonderland program, that was really born out of professional development surveys that we've done over the years, and one of the things the staff said is all the staff, teachers, specialists, they wanted to be able to take the professional development and not necessarily have to facilitate it, because they are experts and they've done it so much. So that day actually was made up primarily of administrators teaching those classes. There were a few consultants, but the vast majority were administrators. And I want to give credit to Dr. Lazovic and Kristen Fox and Stephanie Smith, who put together that program, and that amazing, and I've seen so many professional development programs over the years, that amazing day, which really was just a testament to all of the amazing work the teachers and the staff put in. That was incredible, and that was really the idea born out of the work of Dr. Lazovic, Stephanie Smith, and Kristen Fox.
Thank you. Brett, I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I have heard such great things about the Winter Wonderland program, so thank you everyone for doing that together, putting that together. But what really, not to take away from that, because I think it was very moving, and like Mr. Shaw said, we were kind of moved by it just hearing about it, and we weren't part of that program. But I just want to add that, during that wellness committee, when the students came up and the government body came up, they were comprised mostly of 6th and 7th graders, or a couple of 8th graders in there. Just how poised they were so excited to share their thoughts on school, and gave really great insight to what their day looks like and how things that we do impact them. So I really appreciated the students that came up to share that with us.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to say one thing. As I sit up here and I look at the stage and I see how it was painted, I have to comment on the fabulous production of Cinderella that took place here. The arts are so important, and I think that our students from elementary straight through high school are truly, truly blessed to have such strong arts programs here, from the musical groups, the choirs, the newspaper at the high school, the literary books, the yearbook, and the productions that we do, such as Cinderella. In addition to having fabulous staff that work with our kids, we have amazingly talented kids in our district. And I just want to give a shout out, because we hear so much about, the academic accolades, but I think it's really just as important when something has happened, whether it's a sporting event or a production, to take a moment and just say how impressed we are, how spectacular it was, how wonderful it is that we have children afforded these opportunities to be on a stage and perform the way they love to. And, you know, if there anybody out here who helped our children with this, I just want to say thank you. With that, does anybody else have anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn? Keith and Dave. Thank you, everybody.